Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. In the next half hour or so, then, we'll see what's making the headlines with the comedian and virologist, Ria Lina, and the parliamentary sketch writer at The Telegraph, Madeline Grant, who is not there yet, but I'm sure you'll hold the fort for us in just a moment. First of all, though, let's just check out the front pages, shall we? Starting with the Daily Telegraph, leads with Prime Minister Boris Johnson stressing that the AstraZeneca vaccine is safe amid concerns over a very low number of rare blood clots among inoculated people. That story is also splashed on the Metro's front page, which writes that the European Union has ruled the vaccine is safe and effective. Exploited is the headline on the front page of the Daily Mirror, referring to the 30,000 NHS staff who did overtime while fighting the coronavirus front line. Front page of the Financial Times is a report that David Cameron lobbied the government to increase finance company Greensill Capital's access to state-backed COVID-19 loan schemes months before it collapsed. And there's The Guardian. PM backs jab as row grows over boasts about the rollout. So let's get the thoughts of Ria as we try and establish Madeline. We can't quite hear her is the problem. We can see her, but we can't hear her. It's modern life, I guess, isn't it, Ria? But this is right down your street as a virologist. The Daily Telegraph, the jab is safe. The thing that isn't safe is catching COVID. And this is the risk-benefit analysis that was done both in the UK and in the European Union. As we watch those European nations start to re-roll out the AstraZeneca process. What have you made of all of this?
Well, it's been a very interesting few days, hasn't it? I think that we're all quite rightly concerned that there may or may not be side effects that the trials that they did last year didn't come up with, and that's a normal and natural concern. But the EMA decided to reinvestigate this. The MHRA have also looked into these 30 cases. We're talking about 30 cases of blood clots in individuals after having had the AstraZeneca vaccine. After that, of course, as you know, a number of countries in Europe, Italy, Germany, France, Italy, I've written Italy twice. Italy, Germany, France, the Netherlands, a number of them stopped the vaccine rollout as the EMA decided to look into this. Today, they had a press conference and they have confirmed that they have completed their investigation and found that the vaccine is safe and effective. Now, a lot of this is a numbers game. We've been throwing a lot of numbers over the past couple of days. I think the one that we've heard is that there were 30 cases, that was 25 in Europe and 5 here in the UK, of these unusual clotting events in individuals. They have resulted in a couple of deaths, which is incredibly unfortunate. And so they stopped to look into these cases. And overall, they found that there is no causal link between the vaccine and these clotting events. And that's really what I think many of us want to and need to hear, because, of course, we've seen as well, which is unfortunate, even here in the UK, we've seen a slight increase. It's been reported by doctors and vaccination centres across the UK that we've seen a slight increase in cancellations as people get worried. They've been worried about what this means. And today we've heard definitively from both the EMA and the MHRA that this vaccine is safe and effective. And again, going back to the numbers, what they said is that we've seen 30 cases of clotting events out of about 20 million people, which actually translates to a much lower incidence of clotting than you would naturally expect to see in the population if we weren't going through a massive vaccination rollout. And if anything, some doctors have said that because it is such a low incidence of clotting, that the vaccine might even, and again, let me stress that we haven't done the studies, but they suggest that it could mean that the vaccine prevents against certain clotting events because the incidence of clotting is lower in the vaccinated population. We did see that it was in the trials that they did before we started using the AstraZeneca vaccines. We saw some clotting events in those phases, in the phase 3 trials, but we saw clotting in both those that were given the vaccine and the placebos, which is why overall they've told us this is okay, this is safe and effective, and we're not seeing numbers that are cause for alarm.
Ria, we've got Madeline back, so let's introduce Madeline Grant. Hello, sorry about that. I think it was, you know, it is modern life. We all know this, don't we, from having conversations at home via these means. We were talking there about many of the newspapers leading on the fact that the AstraZeneca jab is safe and effective. The Metro going exactly on those words. But the message today from the MHRA, doubling down on caution, I guess, was please report side effects. You know, 4 days headache, bruising around the site of your arm. You know, let us know. And this is really important, is it, to re-establish, I suppose, real confidence in this jab?
Well, I think that's it, exactly. It's also, I think, to create a sense of, to contextualise the risk in the way that Ria was just doing so well, putting it into the context of other risks. And the PM and the Chief Medical Officer went to great lengths to try and say that, you know, they kept reiterating the point that the jab is safe, but what isn't safe is catching the virus. But unfortunately, I mean, I think, thankfully, they said that though there has perhaps been some slight hesitancy now in taking up the vaccine as a result of the deeply irresponsible comments being made by some EU leaders on the continent, that actually it hasn't had that big an impact on take-up here in Britain. But I suspect the damage that's been done across Europe, where the polling shows that citizens across continental Europe are now feeling very hesitant about the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, it would take a great deal more of this across Europe to try to counteract this level of misinformation. And I think that's partly why the PM was very delightedly sharing the news that he will be getting his jab tomorrow, among with many other 50-somethings.
Yes, and it could well be that the Pfizer jabs that are available will now be going to second doses, because many of the early cohorts had Pfizer, didn't they? Because that was the only one that was available at the time. Yes. So it could be that that is for practical reasons, apart from him trying to send that PR message out there. But Ria, this is the point, isn't it? What do Europeans do now? It's good to see their governments very quickly restarting their programmes, some from tomorrow, some next week. And many people pointing out that this jab is at cost. That was insisted by Oxford University when they tied up with AstraZeneca. And it is also very important for other parts of the world. This, for many countries, is the only jab they've signed up to.
Yes, that is a wonderful thing that we should be shouting about, is that the fact that AstraZeneca is producing this at cost. There is no profit margin in this endeavor, because everybody is interested in making sure that as many people as possible can get vaccinated. And you're quite right, this is the only vaccine that many countries will be using. And so it's important, not just for Europe and the UK, for everyone, that it is safe and effective is the terms that we're using, safe and effective. And what we're having now is exactly as Madeline pointed out, and yourself, is that the way to go forward from this event, the way to feel yourself that you are doing everything you can to make sure that you get through this is to take note of your side effects. And we had this before in the UK. I don't know if you remember that right at the beginning of December, maybe a week after we started using the vaccines, that some of the side effects were allergic reactions. And we adapted to that very quickly. And we now know to look out for that. If you have severe allergies, you are told, please let your doctor know when you go in for your vaccine. And we'll just make that same adjustment now. The adjustment now when people go in for the vaccine, any of them, whether it's the Pfizer, the Moderna, or the AstraZeneca vaccine, is please take note of your side effects. If you have a headache for more than 4 days, which is a common side effect that a lot of people are seeing from getting the vaccine, but if that headache is lasting 3-4 days, please do go see your doctor. If you're seeing some unusual bruising, please go and see your doctor. And this advice isn't just for those being vaccinated. That's actually advice for anybody who might be worried about having a clotting event. Go and see your doctor if you're having some unusual bruising, because as we've already said, and as the numbers have shown, it's not people getting vaccinated that are having clotting events. These happen in the population naturally, and everybody should be aware of these things. So it's just a wonderful way of raising awareness generally about health.
Well, I had my vaccine yesterday, and despite feeling slightly tired yesterday, which I think was the excitement of it all, to be fair, I feel absolutely fine. I think they've put water in me. I'm so worried about it now, actually, but there we are. But let's move on, shall we? Top of the Metro, if we see that again. Picture of sturgeon and salmon with the headline, "Sturgeon did mislead Parliament." That is also in the Daily Telegraph as well, the news tonight. Sturgeon misled the salmon inquiry, say MSPs. Madeline, right, bring us up to date. It's a very complicated story, this, isn't it? But does this matter, this early verdict on it?
It does, yes, and it's very long and very complex and hard to follow, even people whose job it is to do so. So I completely get that.
Yeah, good luck.
The story, yes, thank you. This is the news that the Holyrood Harassment Committee has concluded that Nicola Sturgeon's evidence around sort of non-intervention in the investigation into Alex Salmond is inaccurate and a potential breach of the ministerial code. And now I think what will happen is that the argument will now shift to whether she knowingly misled Parliament or not, and that could determine, her fate and if she is able to cling on. But the Telegraph reported, and I'm sure it's been picked up in some of the other papers as well, that there was quite a tight verdict on the committee. Four of the four SNP MSPs who sit on it voted to back Ms. Sturgeon's version of events, and the four Tory, Lib Dem, Labour, and Labour members believed Alex Salmond. And in the event, the deadlock was broken by a single former Green MP who now sits as an independent. But already, since the news has broken, Nicola Sturgeon does seem to be kind of buckling down. She spoke to reporters outside her home this evening and saying that the opposition members on the committee had kind of made up their minds about her before she had given a single word of evidence. So it doesn't look as if this is the words of a lady who plans to go quietly.
Yes, she certainly accused the committee of being bipartisan, did she not? But if you look at Foreign Wires, the way they report this story, it's quite interesting. They say fundamentally this is about whether or not Scotland has a path to independence, which makes it very significant, of course. We've got local elections coming up in May, haven't we? Whether that is the case or not, people should take note, I guess, shouldn't they? Just briefly, Ria, about this.
Well, the Scottish people certainly have a decision to make in the next month. I mean, this report is being delivered right before Parliament shuts for the elections, and so will actually be considered by the new Parliament. Whether this particular report is what everything's going to turn on is to be seen, and is for the new Scottish Parliament to decide once they're selected. We still also have to wait, of course, as for the report from the Irish lawyer James Hamilton, who's going to do a completely independent report as to whether Nicola Sturgeon has breached the ministerial code. And I think that report is going to carry a lot of weight because he is completely independent of Scottish internal politics.
Bipartisan or partisan? Is this my post-vaccine brain? Which one is it, Madeline?
Well, I think it really comes down to a fundamental issue of the kind of values that are governing Scotland. I mean, I think it is connected to independence in the sense that what's come out well, it's been coming out for some time, but it's really come to a head in the last month or so, is that a picture of a really rotten-looking government, sleazy, lying. We know for a fact that at least one of their last two leaders will have been lying on a kind of grand scale. And even things like, the fact that Nicola Sturgeon decided to, in the midst of the pandemic in early January, she was busy setting up a task force for Scottish independence rather than looking at tackling the pandemic. And all of these things, which is actually something that Salmond alluded to in fact, I think he explicitly said when he was giving evidence to the Holyrood inquiry that, an independent Scotland led by the SNP wouldn't currently be able to function. It would be like a failed state or something along those lines. It was really, quite serious words from one of the great fighters for Scottish independence.
Well done, yes. It is such a complicated story, isn't it? But well done to both of you. We'll see more in just a moment. Plenty more still to come. We will take another first look at the papers, which includes this story in the Financial Times about how former Prime Minister David Cameron lobbied. More on that in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, Ria Lina and Madeline Grant. There you are. Welcome back to you. Ria, let's go to the front page of the Daily Telegraph, shall we? This is the ongoing issue about how NHS staff should be rewarded for the extraordinary effort they did. And they have the news that people got unpaid overtime in the crisis, which in itself is perhaps not so surprising.
No, it's not news that the NHS staff have been giving above and beyond what any, in the past year, in this pandemic. And I think we're all on the same page. I mean, we were talking about partisan or bipartisan. Everyone has agreed that they deserve to be rewarded. And this is coming back to this 1% pay rise that the government has said is affordable. They said, oh, well, we're suggesting 1%. That's all we can afford. And it seems like a slap in the face when they're spending $2.3 million on a press briefing room, 9.3 on a situation room. And yet we can only afford 1% for the NHS. And this comes off the back of finding out that Wales has decided to give everyone a one-off bonus in their health system of what equates to £500 per employee, following off the back of Scotland doing it. And so it's a real kick in the teeth. Now, of course, this offer still has to go to the NHS pay review body. They still have to decide whether or not that is affordable, as Rishi Sunak keeps claiming it to be. So we still have to wait and see whether that 1% is accepted by them or whether they come back with another number.
Did you want to have a quick word on that, or should we move on to the FT, Madeline?
Yeah, just to say, I mean, that this is going to be, I think this story is showing no signs of disappearing, and actually alongside the huge sympathy in the general public for a more substantial pay increase, there's growing numbers on the Tory benches who feel this way too and have expressed that opinion. So I think this is definitely going to be a difficult few months ahead for the government as they weigh up the politics of this as well as the economics.
So, Madeline, let's go to the FT then. Question is, what do you do after you've been Prime Minister, become advisors to various companies, which takes us to this story. Just explain what this one's about.
Yes, so this is a hell of a scoop from the Financial Times. It's the news that David Cameron lobbied personally for Greensill Capital's access to emergency government loan schemes. And this happened months before the company collapse, which left the taxpayer potentially on the hook for any losses. And I have to say that, you know, I think we're going to have to get very used to these kinds of stories when you consider the sheer amount of government money that's been spread out in all directions. I think this is just the very tip of the iceberg of cronyism and dodgy dealing that we can expect. But in a way, I actually quite like this story in a sense, because it shows that he didn't get anywhere. He didn't succeed in his aims. It shows that a former Prime Minister couldn't get the government to take a different risk profile in relation to the scheme that he was lobbying for. You know, people are always going to lobby, but in some ways I quite like the fact that someone as senior as David Cameron actually couldn't get the Treasury to change their approach. OK, we've got the Times in, I think. We hadn't seen it before. Let's just have a quick look at that, shall we? It does picture, well, it talks about the health teams confirming that the Oxford jab is safe to use, but it does picture the Cambridges there by a mural with a crown which says healing herd. So some photographer has managed to snap that one quite cleverly. Perhaps we can do that newspaper when you come back at 11:30. Ria Lina, Madeline Grant, lovely to see you both. Thank you.